Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. I hope everybody's having a great morning. I thought I'd get on here and do a video about confirmation bias. It seemed to be the hot topic in the hearing the other day on the IDAHO4, at least part of it, and the biases that people have regarding pictures and things that they see and how easily they are conformed by their first thoughts, exposure to certain visual, auditorial, and even publications. So, I'm going to show a short video on the confirmation bias, and then I'm going to show some pictures and show you how it's easily able to be compromised.
Hey guys, Practical Psychology here, and in this video we're going to be talking about 12 cognitive biases. Most of these were researched by Ismanoff TV, who has some great animations on topics like these and other self-development topics, so check them out in the description or on the end screen. Now let's get into it. Number 1 is anchoring bias. We humans usually completely rely on the first information that we receive, no matter how reliable that piece of information is when we take decisions. The very first information has tremendous effect on our brain. For instance, I want to sell you a car, and you are interested to buy it. Let's say you ask me what the price is and I tell you $30,000. Now, if you come back a week later and I say I'll sell it to you for $20,000, this seems like a new, very cheap price to you, right? Because your judgment is based on the initial information you got, which was $30,000. You feel like you're getting a great deal, but
And how many times do we fall for this? Whenever we go to the grocery store, whenever we go to a Walmart, a Target, when all you hear is slashing prices, and then you remember what the price was before, and now you have anchored your bias because the original price was 30,000. Now you come back and they say 20,000. So therefore, you feel like you're getting a better deal because the first exposure was at 30,000. So that's what you're basing your price off of.
let's say the first time that you ask me and I say 10,000, and then you come back the next week and I tell you I'm going to sell it to you for 20,000. Now it doesn't look like a very good deal because of the anchoring bias. This is just a very generic use of the anchoring bias, and I don't want a bunch of comments about why a $30,000 car should be sold for $10,000, but another example is trees. What if I asked you if the tallest tree in the world was higher or lower than 1,200 feet? And if so, how tall? The same effect occurs if I ask you to guess out of thin air instead of giving you an anchor of 1,200 feet. The results are crazy. Number 2, availability heuristic bias. People overestimate the importance of information that they have. Let me give you an example here. Some people think that terrorism is the biggest threat to the United States because that's what they see on TV. The news always talks about it, and because of that, it inflates the danger. But if you look at the real perspectives, televisions cause 55 times more deaths than terrorism. Yes, TVs literally fall on people and kill them 55 more times than terrorism. You are more likely to be killed by a cow than a terrorist, according to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. It's more likely to die from a coconut falling on your head and killing you than a terrorist attack. Thank you, Gary Vaynerchuk, for that one. Even the police that are hired to protect you from terrorists, it's estimated that you are 130 times more likely to be killed by the police than by a terrorist. That's because people do not make their decision based on facts and statistics, but usually they make it on news and stories and stuff they hear from other people.
Oh, wow. That was a huge statement right there. They don't base it on facts, they base it on news and other stories that they hear from other people. So if we're going to go with the confirmation bias on the hearing the other day, even the other day was a confirmation bias for a lot of people. Based on anything you might have heard or seen that you haven't heard before or seen before, then that is the starting point for your confirmation bias. As it said before, the way you feel about the situation initially, your emotional attachment or your emotional understanding, go ahead and anchors it down for you. So everything you hear from then on out your bias is going to be adding to your initial anchor.
It's way scarier to die from a terrorist attack than a falling coconut, and because of this, usually the news won't cover it because there's not much money in it. Number three is the bandwagon effect. People do or believe in something not because they actually do believe it, but because that's what the rest of the world believes in. In other words, following the rest without thinking. If you've ever heard someone say, well, if your friends jump off a bridge, would you? Then that someone is accusing you of the bandwagon effect. It happens a lot with us. I mean, a lot of people vote for a certain candidate in the election because he's the most popular, or because they want to be part of the majority. It happens a lot in the stock market too. If someone starts buying a stock because they think it's going to rise, then a lot of other people are going to start picking the stock as well. It can also happen during meetings. If everyone agrees on something, you are more likely to agree with them on that object. In management, the opposite of this is called groupthink, and it's something companies try very hard to deter. Because if 9 out of 10 people agree on something, but the last person doesn't and won't speak up, it could squelch a great idea. Number four is choice supportive bias. So people have the tendency to defend themselves because it was their choice. Just because I made the choice, it must be right. For example, let's say a person buys an Apple product. Let's say it's a MacBook instead of a Windows PC. Well, he's more likely to ignore the downsides or the faults of the Apple computer while pointing out the downsides of the PC. He is more likely to notice the advantages of the Apple computer and not the Windows computer. Why would someone point out that they made a bad decision? Well, let's say you have a dog. You think it's awesome because it's your dog, although it might poop on the floor every now and then. The same goes for political candidates. Not the pooping part, but they both may suck. But one of the lesser of two evils may be more right in your mind because you voted for them. Number five.
That is so true. It is like anytime somebody sees my phone, I have an Android, and they're like, "Oh my God, you got an Android? Apple is so much better." And they start listing all the greatness from an Apple iPhone compared to the Android. And most of the time, they've never even owned an Android. They're just going based on what the salesperson gave them the sales pitch on the Apple product, the iPhone. So it's interesting whenever we describe something, it's kind of like my car is better than yours because it gets better gas mileage. Well, you're failing to understand that your truck might be a V6 and mine be a V8. So instantly, yours is destined to get better gas mileage because of the engine size, the power. It's like, but people don't go with the facts; they go with their opinion, and a lot of that is shown on Facebook.
Five, confirmation bias. We tend to listen to information that confirms what we already know, or even interpret the information that we receive in a way that confirms the current information that we already have. Let's say that your friend believes that sweets are unhealthy. This is generally a pretty broad belief. He will only focus on the information that confirms what we already know. He is more likely to click on videos that confirm that belief or read articles that support his argument. He doesn't go through and type positive health effects of increasing blood glucose levels or positive effects of eating a bowl of ice cream. No, he will instinctively go to Google and type in, how bad is sugar for you? The confirmation bias is very dangerous in scientific situations and is actually one of the most widely committed cognitive biases. Number six, the ostrich bias. This is the decision, or rather subconscious decision, to ignore the negative information. It may also be an indication we only want to consider the positive aspects of something. This goes beyond not only looking for the positive information, but this is when there is negative information and we choose to ignore it as an outlier. Sometimes, even when we have a problem, we try to ignore it thinking it will go away. Let's say you have an assignment to do. It's not something that you really want to do, so you may just keep on procrastinating with it because your mind thinks that it'll go away or is solved by ignoring it. Smokers usually they know it's bad for their health, but a lot of them keep ignoring the negative implications of cigarettes, thinking it will not damage them or might stop them before anything serious will happen because they consider themselves an outlier. To avoid finding out negative information, we just stop looking for it.
Of course, and this goes with let's bury our head in the sand because this isn't going to happen to us. How many times have individuals been robbed, mugged, or even in the IDAHO4 case? I'm sure those four kids didn't feel that they were unsafe in that house, so they buried themselves in the sand with the photos that they took online. All the stuff that people tell you not to do. And I'm not victim shaming here. I'm just calling the obvious. It's kind of like you don't believe that anything bad is going to happen to you, so you become less resilient and less aware of your surroundings or what's being stated, or you don't even really understand that there could be something creeping around to potentially harm you, and it could be anything. It could be anything.
Now, this could be a serious crime in many scientific research laboratories and basically promotes ignorance. Number 7, outcome bias. We tend to judge the efficacy of a decision based primarily on how things turn out. After a decision is made, we rarely examine the conditions that existed at the time of the decision, choosing instead to evaluate performance solely or mostly on whether the end result was positive or not. In other words, you decide whether an action is right or wrong based on the outcome. This goes a little bit into consequentialism, but it goes hand in hand with the hindsight bias. Let's say there's a manager who wants to take the decision. His team and the data are telling him to make one decision, but his gut is telling him to make another decision. Well, he goes ahead and makes the decision that his gut told him to do. And then in the end, it was the right decision. Does that mean it's actually better to trust your gut rather than listen to your team who is advising you based on facts and statistics? Well, that's what the outcome bias is. You take the decision and base the effectiveness of your decision on the outcome, even if it was luck. Now, this is bad logical thinking and will actually lead you to ruined thinking and bad outcomes in the long run.
And how many times have you done this? You get lucky, you make the right call, everything goes well, and then that decision in itself becomes a pattern in your life for everything. So if you chose against this based on a positive effect, that means the next time that you're faced with that kind of decision, you're going to choose the same way because you believe that since it turned out right the last time, that this is a decision that needs to be made like this all the time. And those are concrete words. All the time, everybody.
Number 8, overconfidence. Sometimes you get too confident and start taking decisions not based on facts, but based on your opinion or gut because you have been correct so many times in the past. For example, you are a stock trader and you pick 5 stocks, and in a couple years, all of them turn out to be successful or profitable. It increases your confidence to a point to where you can start believing that whatever stock you pick will be successful. It's quite dangerous because you might stop looking at the facts and solely rely on your opinion. Check out the gambler's fallacy if you want more information on this. Just because you flipped a coin 5 times and it landed on heads doesn't mean that the next time there's more than a 50% chance of it landing on a head again. Ego is the Enemy is a great book about this bias, and I just made a book review on it.
So think about this a little bit. Day in, day out, I do it, other creators do it, and we talk about cases, right? And we bring up certain things that we believe that are relevant to that case. But it isn't factual. It's based on our speculation and our understanding of what could have happened, or if this is a piece of evidence that the police didn't get right, or the police forgot about, or the police overlooked. So we harbor our opinions on this and we bury our head in the sand on what they could possibly have, and we stick to our own belief system, which is this piece of evidence should have been placed to get the individual a different outcome in the future if that's going to be the outcome that happens. Let me ask a question. If in this Idaho 4 case, it's almost like people believe he's guilty, that's why they're trying so hard to prove innocence. Isn't that funny? Like, instead of saying, well, I really don't know whether he's innocent or guilty, they're pushing the innocence so hard because in their mind somewhere, he's guilty. And they won't admit it. They'll never admit that. But why push something so hard if you don't believe the opposite? It's kind of like if you're guilty, you're going to go above and beyond to push the innocence to try to change the outcome. So, all these individuals that are pushing the innocence and going against other people and getting derogatory and name calling and all these things, they wouldn't be pushing that so hard unless they themselves had some doubt that the individual is guilty.
Number 9, placebo bias. When you believe something will have a certain effect on you, then it will actually cause that effect. For instance, you are sick and the doctor gives you a certain medicine. Even if that medicine does not actually help you, even if it's just made of sugar, you believe that it will help you and it actually causes you to recover quicker. This might not sound very logical, but dozens of experiments have proven this. That's why, if you realize positive people usually have a positive life, and vice versa, the way you think is super important, and we've hit on this in previous videos. For the same reason, a lot of personal development books say that if you really believe something, you will eventually achieve it, or at least find a way to achieve it. Because the placebo effect will give you the motivation that you need. The mind truly is a powerful thing. And this actually isn't always bad thinking. In fact, you can use a placebo effect in our advantage if we use it wisely. There's actually a reverse of this, and it's called the nocebo, and this is when it is negative. Number 10, survivorship bias. This bias is when you are judging something based on the surviving information. Let me give you an example here. There are a lot of articles titled like, 5 things millionaires do every morning. Does that mean doing those things every morning will make you a millionaire? No, there are tons of people who did them and didn't become a millionaire, but there are also tons of people who did them and did become a millionaire. So these articles are primarily based on the ones who survived and reject all other people who did the same thing but did not become millionaires. Another example is to say that buildings in an ancient city were built using extreme engineering because they lasted so long. This is a bad conclusion because you aren't considering what ratio of buildings were built to how many that lasted. You're only seeing the ones that lasted thousands of years of weathering, when the other 90% have already washed away. It's hard to know what you don't know. Number 11, selective perception. I like this one. Selective perception is a form of bias that causes people to perceive messages and actions according to their frame of reference. Using selective perception, people tend to overlook and forget that contradicts their beliefs or expectations. Let's say, for example, you're a smoker and you're a big fan of soccer. You are more likely to ignore all the negative advertisements about cigarettes because since you are already smoking, you have this perception that it's okay to smoke. But if there's an advertisement about soccer, you are more likely to notice it because you have a very positive perception about it. This is actually something really interesting and has to do with how you perceive the world due to your subconscious mind and what it filters out. The last one is called the blind spot bias. If I asked you how biased you are, you would probably say that you are less biased than the average person, and you are more likely to base your judgment on facts and statistics, and that's what's known as the blind spot bias, or the bias bias. You are biased because you think that you are less biased than everyone else. For example, I gifted something to my teacher, and the next week she gave me a good grade on a test. If you ask her whether she was biased when she gave me that grade, the answer will be that the gift never affected her decision when marking my paper. But if you ask her if other teachers are biased when students give them gifts, she will say yes, in most cases. And that's what the blind spot bias is. I really enjoyed creating this video, but most of the content was curated by my friend Ismanov. He's got a channel similar to mine, and I'd like you to check it out here or in the description.
Well, why don't y'all go check out Ismanov's page and give him some love because those are some very awesome explanations of the cognitive biases that many people overlook. Even when they're talking, they have a bias towards what's going on in everyday life. You know, you have a bias. You just listen to people talk. So when it comes to the outcome of this court decision to move or stay, um, it's it's just it's it's understandable that your bias would say if you stay, there's more of a chance of being guilty than if you leave. There might be a chance you'll be found innocent. You know, um, so let me find some pictures that I want to show you that kind of go with what they've been talking about. Hold on a second. Okay, do you remember what you felt whenever you first saw this picture? The first time that you actually saw the individual suspected of these murders dressed in a jumpsuit, in handcuffs, surrounded by police. So, what was your confirmation at that point? They got him. They got the one who murdered these 4 kids. And then when you see him in a suit and tie, you see him all cleaned up, your bias is challenged. Could this have been the guy? This is the guy we've always heard of. This is the PhD student. This is the one who had a bachelor's and a master's in criminology. He does look like an investigator at this point. There's no way that he could have done this. No way. Look how clean cut he is. They don't have any evidence. They don't have any real understanding about this guy. Look how he's cleaned up. He had a heroin addiction problem. Look how he overcame that. There's no way he could be the one. You see how the differences in a photograph can give you an instantaneous change of an individual. Even a photo like this can even go the other way to gain the sympathy from your heart. The word that you've read about these cowboy boots, the story that you heard how she loved all pink, the letter M to remind you of her name, and the fact that they were placed in her window. It's an image that has been enmeshed in people's brains since the beginning of the crime. Because this is an image of innocence. The innocence that was taken from these four people. And whether you realize it or not, every time you see this, it pulls at you. Because that's what it's meant to do. That's why visuals are so important when you're talking about certain things. People can identify visuals with feelings. Okay, watch this video and tell me your first thought when you first saw it for the very first time. The emotional attachment that you have to it. You weren't necessarily trying to dissect things, you weren't trying to look for evidence the first time you saw it. What were you feeling? What was your understanding about it? Here we go.
Hi, my name is Xana Kernodle. I'm a marketing major here at the University of Idaho, and I'm involved in a couple things down here, including Vandal Solutions. Last year I did Blues Properties. I was an associate with them, and I basically just worked with Blues Properties and did advertising for them, did sales events, etc. And this year I'm doing sales, so I'm a sales associate. So basically I just call people around Moscow, ask them if they're interested in our business, etc. But yeah, I'm a junior here, so it's really exciting. I love it at the University of Idaho, and I'm super excited to be in this marketing class because it's basically my major. And this is actually King Street, where I've lived the past 2 years, and I really like just hanging out with my friends all the time and being super involved in school events and everything else. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me, and I'm really excited to take on this course.
So it gives an understanding of the person, it gives that person life. Where you've heard so many times about the death, the death, the death. It gives this person life. It gives this person understanding with the individuals watching it. It gives them an understanding of who really was involved in these killings. It's kind of like the pictures of the girls during happier times. The same thing. So all these things have been presented to the public. The Linda Lane footage, the video of the Elantra going by the gas station. So much stuff where you believe the first thing that you see and you don't question it. And especially if more people are echoing the same sentiments as you, you're not going to question it. If anything, you're going to become obsessed with your confirmation bias, the ostrich bias. And it's easy to do. It's kind of like this last picture I want to show. Let me show this last picture. I'm not going to tell you what to think about this picture. Based on what we've talked about, think about the reason this picture was put out there. Why do you think this picture was put out there so early on? Was it to give people the opportunity to anchor their bias? Because they can obviously see an individual that's very distraught, another individual that is explaining something, another individual that is intuitive with the police. And of course, as we later found out, that light bulb cam had a lot of evidence on it, supposedly. So individuals that dislike mainstream media, that dislike bigger name channels, they're basically doing the same thing. Every time they show one of these photos or a video, they're trying to sway their viewers into their light of what they believe. I have done probably about 3 or 4 of these types of videos, not intending to sway people's beliefs, but mostly talking about the evidentiary situation surrounding them. Because you're going to believe what you believed from the very beginning. Most people have not been swayed. If you believed he was guilty at the beginning, then you're going to stay believing he was guilty. If for some reason you believe he's innocent, you're going to believe he's innocent, no matter what people show you. You're going to bring up articles, you're going to bring up quotes and pictures and videos and contradictory things, almost like it's a public trial. And anytime people use witch hunt or mob mentality or something like that, then they're telling you exactly what they believe about the situation. They believe that the individual is being attacked for some reason based on their bias. But at the same time, they go just as hard on their bias as they accuse other people of going. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. And I hope you enjoyed it. Y'all have a good Saturday. I'll talk to you soon. Maestro, cue the music.